Well, welcome back to School Facilities and Operations. I'm Burke Jones. I'm your host. I'm a director of operations for a school district in Kansas, overseeing facilities, transportation, food service, grounds, custodial. So lots of moving parts in my job, just like most of you that are listening. So every episode, we either have another school facility person, someone like me in my role, or we have trade partners or other professionals that have great information to share with us that we can really learn from and really help us in our own districts. So today I have Mary Ruppenthal. She is with HED. She's an architect and she's the educational market sector leader for them, located in Sacramento, California. So welcome, Mary.
Thanks, Burke. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation to join you.
Well, this is awesome. So HED is a huge firm, 400 some people with multiple offices across the United States. So we don't get to talk to someone with that kind of firm level experience very often. So Mary, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your work history, and then tell us like one thing that we won't know about you from LinkedIn. Hobby,
Okay.
whatever, if you like to surf, whatever it is out there.
Okay, I'm happily. My name is Mary. Well, you've already introduced me, but I have about 27 years of professional architectural experience. I grew up in Milwaukee, but outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And once I finished my undergrad, I moved to California, where I started working at a small firm. Decided to go back to grad school, and I went to UC Berkeley. I was working throughout that process, eventually kind of landed at a firm in San Francisco that focused on educational work. It was kind of a happy accident that I wandered into that office one day, and the minute I saw what they were doing, I just was really excited about, educational environments and my own experience, with schools as kind of my second home. Was impactful to me, and the idea of really working on educational environments that are centers of community, ideally, that can really make an educational impact and really, inspire students and really, show the value that communities have in them. So I've really been focused on education. I'm one of several market sector leaders throughout the firm in education, and it touches on community as well as higher ed, but again, primarily focused on K-12 facilities. So I've worked in Southern California, lived in Los Angeles for a period, worked in San Francisco for 15 years before spending 7 years in LA. And now I've been based in Sacramento for the last 5 years. So I've worked with a wide range of districts, both, Los Angeles Unified, which is the second largest in the country, as well as really small rural districts as well. So we've kind of, support the communities across the gamut. And so it's something I love collaborating with districts of all shapes and sizes and really helping them to meet their goals, and then help to maximize the positive outcomes that we do within every project.
Yeah. I think, okay. So tell us one thing about yourself that we wouldn't find out on LinkedIn.
Well, I went to undergrad on an athletic scholarship. I'm a runner, and
Wow.
it's something that's really helped me. Just, it's something that I love to do even today. My dad was a contractor, and he taught me the idea of kind of measurable results, I think, at an early age. I'm one of 5 children, and my parents basically said every sport or every season, we don't care what sport you do, but you all have to get out of the house and do a sport. So my sister is 4 years older than me, and she said, I want to run. And so my dad, the contractor, took one of his wheelie measuring tools around the neighborhood, and he wheeled out every 400 meters, like a 2-mile course. And I was in 3rd grade, and my sister was in 7th, and I started running with her. And we just got faster and faster. She ran Boston Marathon a number of times.
Wow.
She came in 25th in the LA Marathon in her age group at the time. I'm not as, I don't do marathons. I do half marathons sometimes, but anyway, running's a big part of my life.
Very cool. I remember that, like you talked about your dad taking the wheel. I remember like getting in my parents' car and driving a route to see, you know, what 2 miles was. And now we just pull it up on our computer or our watch and go run. And it's just really funny. So, well, that's cool. So what did you run in college?
Cross country and track.
Okay.
Um, but I was an art major my first semester, and my professors were like, you should really take some architecture classes, because everything I was doing was really, sculptural and big. And once I got into architecture, I had to kind of make a decision, because it was a Division I school. We were every weekend we were going to meets, and um, you know, a lot of time was needed to be devoted to running, and I couldn't kind of do both. So
Yeah.
I'm happy I chose architecture.
You can only stay up so many nights in architecture school. I mean, I've done that. I think my record was like 40 hours and that was it. I was done. So
I think 54 was mine, but I was like super delirious. But running
yeah,
actually helps, it still gives me, I mean, it gives energy. Like if you're a runner, it's like you say that something like, I feel really tired, I'm going to go for a run, because it gives you energy.
yeah, it does. It does. So funny story about studio. So those of you that don't know, like architects spend many, many hours in college drawing stuff. And after that 40-hour stint, I had just like had a couple dates with the girl who's now my wife. I mean, she's been my wife forever now, but so we had planned when my project was over to go see a movie. And I thought I wouldn't stay. I thought I was more ahead than I was. So I got the project done, been up like 40 hours, 38 hours, something like that. And we go to the movie and literally I'm asleep in the first preview. It was just, I slept the whole movie. She stayed with me. She still married me. So that was all good, but it's tough. It's a tough degree to get for sure. Well, I think what we wanted to talk about today was just school buildings. And I think, in our conversation before, I think you hit the nail on the head for what I believe, in that everything revolves around the kids and providing them opportunities for better education through the building. And I think you used the term, like in some projects, it's all about the building. And then you saw buildings that were really all about the kids. And without the kids in there, they're just really not anything. So I guess just share your thoughts about kind of where we are with design of schools. What are some trends you're seeing? What do you think makes a great school design?
I think schools that truly function as centers of the community um, do the best to serve their communities. And I can offer a number of concrete examples. There's a district down in San Jose that is probably one of the most innovative districts I've ever worked with, in terms of really trying to, help, help the community be stronger, and provide resources to the community, not just for the students, but for families. So in some of their student union projects, well, in all of them, they really erased the kind of the stigma that previously existed in terms of subsidized lunches, whereby students that were getting subsidized lunches would mostly be on campus because they'd have to go to a certain place. Students who weren't getting it wanted to go off campus. So you saw this really clear social divide.
Right.
And in these student union projects, the programming was so innovative. The student unions basically are, a gathering place for students that offers food service. So they kind of turn the cafeteria into, a place students really want to be. It sort of looks kind of like a food court in a mall. It's
Uh-huh.
kind of this really nicely designed. You can see the food being prepared fresh. And it's kind of by choice. There's a little bank teller portion within the building
That's
that
cool.
that is where all students go. If you are getting subsidized, you go there to load your card. If you can pay for your own lunch, you go to there to load your card. So everyone has the same card. And it's one of, truly, I've been there probably 25 times because we work with this district, but I love going there because you walk into the space, it's beautifully daylit. Off to the side is a food service. There's a library, a little library that is also, there's no security on it. You know, it's a place where it's really for the students. There's a copy room that is both for, so in this building, there's also admin, which is kind of at the back. So, and the principal's office is right in the middle of this like football shaped volume. And so you have all of the teachers on campus going to this building to pass through to go to admin. You have them making copies for class. The students can use the same copy room. There's free paper, reams of paper. There's a student and parent resource center that's like a little retail room. It's set up like a store so that if somebody needs clothes or food or water, you go into the space that looks like a retail environment, and it doesn't feel like you're, you can get a jacket, and it's not, again, it removes that stigma. It is really just a vital dynamic place that people really want to be. And they've charged the associated student body who's in that space as well with kind of resetting the space. So in the student union, but all the students take care of it. I mean, when I was there during the World Cup, they were watching the game on this huge Jumbotron, and it was kind of like it's the heart of the community and the campus. It's open late, it's open early. So there's kids there all the time. And then because there's a spontaneous connection between the teachers running into the students, you have these kind of dynamic moments where learning just isn't in the classroom. It's, it kind of extends to the rest of the campus. So they also, I love this district so much because they really rethink what it means to be, have a school be the center of community. They use this program called Facilitron, which allows folks in the community to rent space on campuses that might be underutilized. Or just for like a wedding, let's say you wanted to get married, what kinds of spaces can you rent that are school spaces? So it helps to put money back into the schools as well as keep these spaces being used. We're doing a performing arts theater for this district on the same campus as the student union. And they wanted to really kind of question the idea of a fixed performing arts building that is only used, that has fixed seating and a stage. And they had one on campus. It was built in the 70s. This was a design build project. So our first task was, we want to breathe new life into the building. Their student union project was a mix of existing buildings and new. We always look at kind of building, breathing new life and trying to retrofit. But in this instance, we had some seismic limitations. There was dry rot. And also, it had a sloped seating area and then a fixed seating. So once we wanted to kind of rethink it, we saw that the best value was going to be to replace the building. This performing arts building is not going to have a stage. It has a stage area, but it has seating that projects out, basically telescoping seating for 300 people. But a lot of times the space can be used for gathering. It can be used multifunctionally. So it's not going to be a stagnant space that is only used for these precious moments. It's going to really allow the campus to flex it. And I think that's the best value for the district, where it can be used year round and it doesn't become a siloed use that is only, used in reality, for 4 events.
Right.
So, I think, this kind of thinking about how to make school centers of community, how to serve families and students, how to equalize and provide more equity in the services. They're also bringing counseling to the student instead of having the students go to the counseling centers and be one-on-one, and maybe you don't want the teachers or the students, feel also stigmatized if they're going to counseling. They're basically, having meetings throughout the campus, meeting the students where they want to be. So it's really kind of looking at kind of a student-centered approach, but it also serves, these are some of the happiest teachers I've seen, the principal.
That's awesome.
The principal whose office is right in the center of the union, not in the back where it has like, an escape door. She is like the center of the school community, and all the, the staff is it's just, these campuses have a feeling that I haven't really experienced very often. They're very dynamic, very, they have these, you know, impromptu jazz ensembles where the students are playing outside. It feels kind of like a slice of life. They design schools like spaces that students want to be when they're not in school. And
Yeah, that's cool.
as a result, they want to be there. I mean, when we say that first we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. I mean, these campuses really are providing some great facilities for these students, and the resulting outcomes are measurable.
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff you said there, it just sounds really cool, where it's almost like feels almost like a college or something, where, I'm just thinking back to those days of the union and how we all interacted together in those kind of spaces. It almost sounds like that.
Well, the director of facilities was also is an architect, or spent a lot of time as an architect, and then became a director of facilities like yourself, Burke.
Uh-huh.
And it being in kind of in an area of like Silicon Valley where there's a lot of rethinking how things work, I think has been a little bit of an influence, because they really, there's not a lot of, I mean, even our theater consultant on this project, his head was exploding when we were like, when the program was starting to say this isn't going to be a traditional theater. He, it's sort of like, the idea is, there's labs on the back of the stage. There's labs that feed out onto what would be the stage, but that stage isn't stagnant. It's going to be a flex classroom. So it's not, and the back wall of the once the proscenium is open, and it's a big skyfold door,
Oh, cool.
you can see the lab spaces. They're glass nanowalls that all feed into it. So there's photo lab and there's drama. So if there's a performance, they're going to put up curtains to conceal that, maybe, but maybe it's just recognizing, what is theater sort of, and what does theater require. So if the students are, using their imagination, they're not going to be as strictly into saying, I mean, it's
Yeah.
rethinking things a little bit, to the fact that it's also not having all the cost of all of these, fixed, fixed theater components that you think of.
Right.
It's a lot more flexible, and it allows for the space to be used a lot more dynamically. So I think just as a trend, that's what, we seek to minimize spaces that are single use, in some cases, spaces that are empty a large part of the day.
Mhm.
How can we create spaces that really are more dynamic and have the idea of like human flow through space is like the breath and blood in a body. And if it stops, it becomes stagnant, right? It's also not the best use of public funding when you have spaces that aren't sitting there not being used. You don't want to overbuild. You don't want to build more than what is needed. And if these spaces can really be more dynamic and flex, and it's a healthier environment. It's spaces that are constantly being used. You don't have these kind of dead spaces. So
Right. But yeah, I'm just thinking, we built a brand new elementary school, and it's very innovative. It's kind of two wings, but the corridors, first of all, they're not just parallel wall corridors. They're kind of a jigsaw type thing, but they're extra wide. And at the end of that is the media center. So, but we put like movable glass walls between the media center and this large hallway, because you could also have all the parents in this hallway for a meeting. Okay, so it's kind of mixed space, but what we found was we shouldn't have put the glass walls in, because no one ever brings them out. They're always into the storage on the side. Because the media center just feels so much like almost an extension of the corridor, that there was really no reason. No one liked the feel of it when it was blocked off by the glass partition. I just think when you talk about flexible space, it's sometimes really hard to understand how it's going to be used, I guess, is really my point. And so if you put in a lot of movable partitions and this and that, you may or may not ever use them. Like, they might always be closed or they might always be open. But I guess there's always a chance someone could decide that they want to use the space differently. Um, I like that idea of that, the performing arts being very flexible, because when you think about like our auditorium, they do what, 4 plays a year and some music performances. So maybe it's used 15 times a year, and you have this giant volume of space that just sits there. So I really like some of those ideas. So I guess a little bit like maybe we can talk about that project specifically, but at a little deeper level, like how are they handling security in and out of like the student union? Um, is it connected to other buildings, or is it like it's freestanding thing
It's
that
free.
kids from multiple schools come to?
It's freestanding. It's kind of it's at the kind of main entry of the campus, but it's on the edge of the campus. Um, I think students from other campuses would go there if there's, some reason for them to be there.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of security, I mean, but it primarily does serve this campus. When you walk in, so I've been there very early when the doors were still locked. But then there were students inside, and we walked to the kind of around the other side, and some folks let us in. So there's admin folks at the
Right.
building all the time, but they, I guess they were kind of there is a place to sign in once you get there.
Right.
There's a desk there's kind of like a family resource person, a staff member that sits at that desk. So if a parent is coming in, they go to this desk, which is right there at the front entry.
Right.
So that person has kind of has visibility on kind of who's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of transparency in the building, and a lot of what is important to us in design too is what was important to them, which is, designing for passive supervision. So in our
Right.
performing arts building, some of the classrooms off of this performing arts are visual arts and dance and things like that, that are connected through these operable partitions. And you made a good point about Burke, about I've seen them not used on campuses on other projects that, when you tour, you see them being used very well in some cases. Sometimes it depends on the staff person who,
Uh-huh.
either does not like them. Here in our office, actually, we have a big operable partition in our conference room that we keep it open, but we close it when somebody's having a meeting, or, but
Right.
most of the time it's open. It just allows like a little bit more free flow, of feeling in the office. Um, um, but the idea of that kind of passive supervision, and I think, when we talk about safety and security, having the ability to connect spaces is beneficial, even if at one point it might not be used. I think,
Right.
programming, really understanding if it's going to be a benefit is important, but I think also like operable partitions to the outdoor are always wonderful, because you enable, you empower and enable the opportunity to create more openness. When we think about safe campuses, we're trying to create sort of relational safety where, it's safer, it's safer if you can kind of see what's happening around you, rather than having, a wall without windows and a door with
Right.
a peephole. You can, and what it does, it creates connections in the community. You start to lose when you don't have this kind of community connection. It's where you start to lose track of being able to keep track of students and
Mm-hmm.
really see what's happening. um,
Yeah.
See who's on the fringes, see who's on the outskirts. If you're creating a community that allows all in, and I think, a big trend we're seeing is designing for equity and inclusion. And so how do you do that? It's so much about architecture is creating a feeling of belonging, and
Right.
spaces that allow you to come together in different sizes of groups, also places where you can have a place of respite, but where you feel connected nonetheless, where it's not kind of this, other environment that's siloed. So,
Right.
um,
So I really like a lot of that is just that community connection. I mean, our buildings are used every night. There's till 10 o'clock. There's somebody in every building. And I think as I've talked to people in other districts across the country, that's normal. So then it becomes like, how to best integrate that? What kind of uses does the community have that we already have that we can bring together? So I love all that thinking. So one of the other things I think we wanted to touch on, I'm really not sure where to go with this exactly because I live in the land of tornadoes. But it's just this idea of, I guess, protecting or keeping schools safe from different types of Mother Nature activities. Is that kind of what we were thinking? Um, like I know here we have FEMA shelters. Every one of our school has a space that meets the FEMA requirements and the whole school can go in there and be safe from a tornado. But other parts of the country, like what does that look like for different types of environmental risk, fires and earthquakes and that kind of stuff?
yeah, designing school amenities to be emergency relief centers in the event. Well, one, how do you design a school so that it can function during what we were experiencing here? And it happens, in other places in the world too, is the fires. California, we have fire seasons that can be really debilitating. It's interesting how the COVID air quality, vigilance kind of led into, a little bit of a silver lining about like, I think a couple of years ago there was a wildfire that coincided with COVID, and so everyone's inside, but I think the importance of filtration, we always are advocating for MERV 13 filters. Most of our schools that are going for chips, that's kind of a best practice anyway. But air purification was, San Francisco Unified spent 2.9 million on enhanced air purification systems. When during that wildfire season, when students were sent home from school because, but their home environment wasn't much better if they didn't have filtration. So to send a child home makes no sense. But if a school can accommodate how to filter air, so that so learning can still happen. At home, we got a bunch of air filters and I had the air quality sensor. We're preparing schools in the same fashion to make sure that we can still function during these kinds of events as much as we can. So there's, standalone filtration systems that, again, a lot of investment during COVID is going to have long-term benefits.
Yeah. That's what I always wondered when, they're talking about all the outside air that, the air changes in the room they want us to have and everything. But when you have smoke and ash in the air, how does that work? And I guess you're explaining it there with the different filtration systems.
Yeah, in a best case world, you'd have on a non smoky day and fresh air, you have, economizers that are bringing in fresh air. You might have displacement ventilation that's just louvers in the exterior that draw natural air in, and vent it out high, which is a wonderful way to have a nice, balanced indoor environment. But yeah, you run into those quagmires with fire season with, I think the point of just how do you continue to allow education to happen during the worst case scenarios, and then how can these facilities help communities who are going through a disaster? So designing a multi-purpose room, really considering, even if there's not a locker room, needed,
Right.
because each district is a little bit different, whether they use locker rooms, whether they don't. But trying to build in some opportunity to have showers that can serve like, let's say your gym or multi-purpose room is a community
Right.
emergency center, how to set it up so that it can really function to help serve the community in the event that it does need to
Yeah.
take care of the community members. So just thinking of those kinds of amenities and infrastructure that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I hadn't really ever thought about that, but you're right. I mean, while we're building, it's not that much more expensive to think about those things and get some of those in there. Um, One of my first guests on the show, in Andover, Kansas, there's videos of it on YouTube, but they had an elementary school that took a direct hit from a tornado. Um, and he was actually inside the FEMA shelter when it happened.
Oh, wow.
Uh, he's like, it's the scariest thing ever. So, but obviously that school wasn't used for a while as they rebuilt, but some really crazy video from that. So since this is more unique to California, is there like earthquake proof rooms, or are all the codes just so tight on the structural system that the building's probably not going to fall down?
The codes are really rigorous. So, yeah, a school designed in California is going to be a lot more, it's going to meet the code requirements here, which is why when I referenced trying to reuse that 1970s building, and it was like, that's our first go-to, is to try to breathe new life. But, there's some codes about full rehabilitation requirements. If the cost of the modernization is greater than 50% of the cost of the replacement, you start to get into all these. So sometimes, like in the case of our new performing arts, it was going to be more expensive to try to keep the existing building. And then there were all these unforeseens, like we knew there was some dry rot. So, but seismic code is pretty robust. And I think that's what we're running into a lot is the trade-off, really doing the analysis when we're looking at a retrofit versus, to understand what the impact is structurally,
Yeah,
to bring it up to code. And a lot of times, it's going to be less expensive to replace the building, unfortunately.
yeah.
I mean, not a lot, but, that's what we're running into quite a bit, just as codes continue to evolve. And
Well,
I think I wanted to mention just about the whole idea of flexibility as being kind of like a through line on things that are important for us to think about when we were looking at facilities. And I just wanted to quickly touch on how that translates into CTE as well, and trying to prepare for career technical education that we don't even know yet
I
is
know.
curriculum that it doesn't exist. But kind of in the same way that spaces that we design want to flex, in these CTE spaces, what we were trying to do is build them kind of using an open building concept, which allows for, minimizing brace frames as you talk about structural,
Mhm.
which would allow a space to, change shape without as much cost, creating an interior environment that can have flexibility, that can have infrastructure, water, gas, compressed air, in such a fashion that it can be reconfigured easily as things change. So like outfitting the building with a certain amount of things that will help benefit it from the long term without having to do tenant improvements or other improvements when things evolve. So we're trying
Yeah,
to really prepare for what we don't know, in future, future career technical education.
it is. It's fascinating because there's just this resurgence of, and CTE is kind of a gamut. I mean, it's from welding to very technical kind of things from what the research I've been doing on it. But I think this resurgence of the trades, and like not everybody has to go to college. Like it's equally impressive to get a trade and um, a career in that field as it is to go to college. And so I think that's what we're all trying to figure out is, what does that look like? And what do we want to do at the K-12 level versus what community colleges and other outlets should do? So do we want to have a welding program, or should that be, hey, we have an agreement with the community college and we'll bus kids over to get that education? And we want to do other things in our CTE program. So that's kind of where we're at, is thinking about what is it going to be, and then what's the building eventually going to look like that houses it. Um, looking around just the area that we're in Kansas, I mean, it's everything from engineering to, culinary to carpentry and welding. They have programs really that cover the span of that. Um, so it's fascinating to think about, and I wish it would have been more prevalent when I was in high school, because I was the kid that was in every wood shop class I could take, but there's other things that would have been really cool to do hands-on. Um, so I'm excited for the direction all this is heading. Um, so you're not thinking like movable walls and stuff in there necessarily. You're thinking about the shell offers the flexibility to reconfigure inside, almost like a
Yeah.
tenant improvement or something like that.
Yeah, just so that future modifications, how to reduce the cost for future modifications. So, having non-shear walls, if we can,
Right.
things that, or, a column spacing that allows for, flexibility, not having like concrete masonry walls where you'd want to maybe allow for adaptation in the future,
Right.
just for the space to be able to flex. And yeah, I agree, Burke. I mean, it is exciting just to, I had wood shop, sewing, home ec. I mean, all of the hands-on stuff, drafting,
Yeah.
learning by doing is so important for everyone. And so it is good that there's a resurgence of, in San Francisco, I was working on the workforce campus, which is welding. City Build is the mayor's office, where it teaches folks who don't know how to swing a hammer. It really puts them through this apprenticeship program that then they get hired by the city to work on projects. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's a really these CTE opportunities. Your discussion about, or you're mentioning the partnerships with these community colleges. I think that's great to really understand what exists that you can tap into, and then what do you want to provide yourself, and what is your community kind of looking, what are careers that partnerships in the community can help with, like in Napa, their high school is a lot of culinary connection and stuff like that. Down in Silicon Valley, it's more tech, there's robotics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It is kind of geographically influenced, which is always kind of interesting as you work kind of around, in LA, there were some, studio, it was like film and a lot of drama and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So it's interesting. And then to think of like the careers that haven't yet been developed, but that
Yeah,
are
it
still in
is.
flux.
I know locally our electricity provider did some partnership with a school district, because I think they're seeing so many people retire from like being linemen and really, I don't know, I've heard them called gray collar jobs where, you might have a hard hat on, but it's highly technical. And so they started like a little campus at one of the high schools where they're like teaching kids those types of skills, in the hope, I'm sure, that some of them will just transition into that career. So it's pretty interesting what's happening. I think there's a lot of opportunities for private public cooperation to develop some of these things. Anything else you want to cover off that was on your mind?
Well, I think I could chat with you for a very long time. We have a lot of common ground, and I so appreciate just the conversation.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
this has been fun. So I'll tell you what, I ask everybody the same three questions at the end of this. They're pretty easy. They're kind of rapid fire. So this first one's going to be super easy for you. So what would your parents or your family say that you do for a living?
um, Design and build things.
Yep. When I was an architect, my grandma always used to ask me if I was still drawing those pretty pictures, which I thought was funny. Um, so are you a paper person or digital person? Like, do you do everything digitally, your notes and sketching and all that, or are you on paper?
It's a combination. It used to be, earlier in my career, it was, obviously more paper but I learned AutoCAD in undergrad. And so it's always been, has had an element of digital. Now it is more, I still, I have a pen in my hand. I sketch quite a bit, but it's probably a larger percentage digital now. In fact, I've saved, the occupational hazard of paper cuts has kind of gone by the wayside because we don't print sets that much anymore. Everything is on, electronic, which saves a lot of paper, but it's large. There's still a percentage of there always will be.
Yeah, there is. I'm mostly digital, but I still have a little scratch pad just while I'm on the phone or whatever. Okay, last question. Are you a morning person? Like, when do you get your best work done? What time of the day?
I'm a morning person. Yeah, definitely morning. I'm an early bird.
Yeah. Got to get your run in.
Yeah, exactly. Getting the run in, and then I'm just having a I'm not a late bird. I used to be when I was when I was in school, but as I get older, I'm definitely more of a morning person.
Yeah, that's the way I am. Not too early, but reasonable hour. Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
If anybody wanted to reach out with you with any questions or anything, what's the best way for them to find you?
Well, I can share my email address.
Okay.
It's M Rupenthal at HED.design. So MRUPP as in Peter, ENTHAL at H as in Henry, E as in Edward, D as in David, .design.
Perfect. And I'll put that in the show notes too, and that way they can find you. Well, thanks a bunch, Mary. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Burke. Wonderful chatting.